Coming to you from top secret field offices worldwide, these brave men and women fight a battle for truth, justice, and good clean data. These agents of change make up the Bureau of Records, Objects, and Standards. They are the Data Bros.
Welcome to Data Bros, a comic book industry podcast talking about comics, comic data, comic book retail, and running a modern comic shop. I am Django.
I'm
here with...
Oh, sorry, I misread that.
No, it's... I wasn't... And also...
We are walking all over each other.
Brian.
Django, this is Data Bros, not the Perfectly Acceptable podcast.
Oh, sorry, I got confused. I thought that was I thought this was a game we were playing. This is the serious one.
You sound like Mike Rundle over there.
I got a quick question for you guys.
What's up?
I have been referring to these episodes as issues.
Yeah,
so whenever
I noticed.
we put out an episode, I call it issue, volume 1 issue. This will be issue 4. What do you think about?
Are you doing it ironically?
No, using the volume tag for issues versus the volume tag for episodes. Is that reasonable? The Comet standard, Django.
Issues. Well, I mean, I would say the volumes would be more like seasons for us.
This is
right?
bad content. This is bad content.
All right, into Data Bro-Ification.
Jeff Figley, ladies and gentlemen,
that was episode 0. The sausage should have been covered there.
Our bellwether.
This is terrible content. Folks, we don't want to waste your time, so we're going to get right into Jeff theme song.
On the topic of wasting time,
yeah.
I have only been listening to the Full House theme on repeat, trying to find inspiration for this one. Right now, it is a note for note copy of the Full House theme. So
I thought Bro-Ification was going to be like, I thought we were going for like.
No, I agree with Django. It sounds professional.
Hey, let's talk about something a little bit sad this week.
Oh, no.
There were a lot of shops that we lost in 2023. Right off the top of my head, there's Jeffrey Comics and Heidi Ho Comics in California, opened in 1977, one of the first comic shops like ever, and they shut down. The owners retired. We saw a lot of shops in California close. Heroes Comics in Fresno, who was a managed comic store, the owner Dave Allred retired after 34 years in business. He said he was going to is it pilot boats or is it float boat? What do you do with a boat? Do you drive a boat?
You
sail it.
You sail
well,
it.
He wasn't sailing though, because it was a motorized boat. So do you motor a boat?
Oh, no. Sorry. Federalism. You're thinking of, sailing means a lot of things.
So you can sail a motorboat.
Yeah. Absolutely. The Titanic, one of the saddest sailboat sinkings of all time.
Well, Dave is off to sail into his retirement, and he sold the business to a customer. What's crazy though is before he left, the reason he retired is because his landlord increased his rent by 70%.
Good
and
Lord!
He just noped out of there. So I forget the name of the guy that bought the business, but he basically bought all the stuff and the customers and everything. He's carried on and he's starting his own, like a different name and everything. We lost AJ's Comics,
closing, but not closing.
Yeah. Like Dave's gone, but there's Dave's not here. Dave's not here, man. Yeah. But there's a new Dave who's not named Dave, I believe. In Connecticut, AJ's Comics closed right at the beginning of the year. AJ's was owned by Peter. Oh gosh, I can't remember Peter's last name, but he had owned it for like, I think 15, 20 years. And he just decided to get out of the game. And so he shut down his business. He was our third managed comic store, which really kind of bummed me out when he left. Endgame Comics in Ventura, California also closed. I see that
I was
on
looking at
YouTube.
your notes. I thought it was Endagame.
Oh no, that's Endgame.
Endgame. Okay.
Which is really
Endagame is
confusing
the
because
bar
there's
down the
an
street.
Endgame comics in England. I want to say like maybe Ireland. Anyway,
Okay.
UK. And they always confuse me because I always got them confused with the Ventura because their logos were awfully similar, but they're apparently not related at all. Brainstorm Comics and Gaming in Maryland closed, which that was just kind of the tail end of 2023. And, there was a lot of shops like we noticed. I can think off the top of my head, subscription store in Cambridge, just down the street, down the road from me, there was a Hero's Tale that started up. So there was a bunch of new stores, and there's been a really cool path that I've noticed where stores will start out online and develop an audience, and then while they're kind of getting all their brick and mortar ducks in a row, they start to build up that weekly clientele and everything. So as soon as they're open, like a Hero's Tale, they've done massive signings. They just had Gail Simone there last month, and like it's a really cool little shop. The guy's a retired school teacher, and he's just like, this is my post retirement shop. Yeah. So yeah, it's been sad but pretty happy, I think, because it feels like there's as many or more new stores opening as there are closing. It's just some of those closing stores are like the old guard.
I think the comic stores are a business that maybe tends to run longer than a lot of retail does.
Yeah.
And like be handed down from owner to owner in a way that a lot of stores, clothing stores and stuff like that aren't necessarily as legacy filled as comic shops.
It's true. And it kind of fits with the whole third place thing that we talked about last time. Where it's your bar. It's your place that you go to where everybody knows your name. Da-na-na-na-na-na.
Yeah.
Right? Jeff, too
careful.
Even
no,
know
no,
10
seconds.
No, I only got 5 seconds. Oh, there we go. All right. You know what else has a lot of legacy, Django?
Numbering. Marvel Comics numbering.
Have you guys been paying attention? Stop. Have you guys been paying attention to our title sponsor, Murphy's Apple Juice's drama?
Man, I don't know what's going on over there, but that Bob is a very direct dude, but I can never quite tell what he's talking about.
Bob is a direct dude. Alan, obviously the kind of right-hand man, the person who does most of the Murphy engineering at this point, has an absolute addiction at this point, it seems like, to texting me with whatever drama is happening in the facility, in the crushing, where they're crushing the apples. And it all seems so childish, selfish.
They crush them? I was under the impression they juice them.
Well, it's a press. Yeah, it's an apple press.
Oh.
Yeah.
You don't juice without a crush.
Well, but a big thing that's happening at Murphy's is one of the reasons that they've been able to succeed as an apple juice business with all the amazing packaging they have is that they press the apples, then you have a bunch of the apple grind left over, right? The solids, not of the apple juice. Murphy's had a subsidiary, I forget the name of it, but they were baking and making all sorts of apple product with the physical rind that was left.
Really?
That market has cratered. Okay. It seems like the grapple is out there replacing Apple's place in the world. So anyway, Murphy's hasn't been able to make money off of the physical discard. Juice is a lot harder to sell because everyone's
Carrie's idea of the biodegradable pack. Everything
and this is why LaCroix, since the pandemic, has been crushing it, putting big juice in its corner. Murphy's is.
I honestly hope they can figure things out, because this is an expensive podcast to do, and we really can't afford to do it without a title sponsor like Murphy. So I hope everything. Why don't we take a second and just hear from our sponsors real quick, and
listen to the sponsors,
maybe some
finances thing.
Whatever is good. Yeah, let's hear from those guys.
Hi there, it's Carrie from Murphy's Apple Juice, and I'm here to announce more exciting news here at Murphy's. We're moving full steam ahead with our industry-leading 100% compostable, fruit-based packaging, and to that end, we'll be moving out some inventory. You will want to stay tuned for a deal so great that the board might get fired.
You know what time it is? It's time to check in the sack of emails. Who did we hear from this week?
Here's an email from Chad at Emerald City Comics. Chad writes, "Hello. It was interesting to hear the contrasting best-selling book lists. Here's ours by quantity sold. Number 5, How to Tell If Your Cat is Plotting to Kill You. Number 4, Spider-Man TPB, Craven's Last Hunt. Number 3, How to Talk to Your Cat. About gun safety. Number 2, Something is Killing the Children Volume 1. Number 1, TMNT, The Last Ronin hardcover." Chad goes on to say, "I like the idea of having a separate new comics section for number ones and jumping on points. For us, new comics are racked alphabetically by title, all full-faced. Exception, superhero titles are racked by the character's name instead of title. Amazing Spider-Man, for instance, is racked under Spider-Man. This week's new comics have a new label in front of them for easy browsing. We also have one-issue labels. We do have a separate little display of some number ones on a table in the center of the store. Thanks again for doing this podcast. Chad Rivard, General Manager, Emerald City Comics."
If you'd like your email to be read on Data Bros, drop us a line at podcast@databrosinc.com. Now let's get you back to the show.
Okay, well, thanks to Murphy's Apple Juice for sponsoring us, and I think it's time, you guys, to have a little industry yammer. What do you think?
Yammer.
There was an
Put a thumb in a sweet potato.
What is this song going to sound like again? What? This is like a
just a yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's all about root vegetables.
A lot of yams. Okay, so sketched.com, David Harper at sketch.com had an article that came out a little while ago. SKCHD.
SKTCHD.
He had just kind of a recap of 2023. He does that twice a year. Usually in like June, he'll talk to a bunch of retailers and take their temperature, and then again at the end of the year. And so we read this and just kind of wanted to
controversially
talk about
not behind the
at.
paywall wall. So you'll be able to read completely great, a total pain in the beep, and everything in between. Retailers discuss a year of change in comic shops. And we'll include
we can put the link in the
show
show.
notes. Yeah. Jeff, can you just jam that link down there?
Absolutely.
Oh no, you're
I'll
just
start
music,
writing
sorry.
it now.
Right.
Hold
You write a
piece of
song
paper
about
with
this
the
link?
written on it. Oh yeah, I've already got a couple.
I guess my main takeaway from this is that I think things are still hard, but not as dire as retailers generally felt like it was earlier in the year, and probably also not as dire as some of us make it sound.
There was a really nice quote in there that somebody had said to the effect of the comics industry isn't one industry, it's 2,500 industries, which I think there's a lot of truth to, because reading the complaints from some stores don't apply to our store at all. Reading the things that work well for other stores might not be working well for our store. Django and I run a stop in Bellingham, which is a unique thing about the comics industry. I think it's really cool that it's such a small industry and people know each other and there's a real sense of identity within a community. But it also means that with that, you get a lot of people complaining that things are going poorly. It might not be applicable to everyone. I think this article kind of focused on a lot of the doom and gloom that is put forth from retailers, and then sort of showed the truth to that, but also where that didn't come to fruition and how 2023 ultimately did end a bit better than it started. But it's always really interesting within comics to see who is upset about what, right? There's always somebody yelling about something.
Yeah. And it was Ryan Higgins who said that about there being 2,500 comic industries. And that's so spot on.
Yeah. And I think there's like, yeah, that's funny because I always joke that we have 180 comic shops that use Managed Comics, and they use it 273 different ways,
Yeah,
which I think is true for anything, right?
it's
Like,
pretty accurate.
what I think is really interesting is like going back to the 2,500 different kind of industries. A lot of the problems that individual shops have are very geographically kind of, a good example was California. Like rents in California went out of control. Also, I
Mhm.
believe minimum wage went up quite substantially in California. So
We're
places like
dealing with
that
that
are
at
going
our
to
shop
see,
too.
for sure, yeah. And you're going to see a big difference compared to, like, I don't know, let's say Ontario, where our minimum wage only went up like 30 cents an hour this year. But um, there's places where minimum wage went up. What did yours go up?
Went up
A
a
buck right
dollar. Well,
now?
Yeah.
it's pegged to the state minimum wage. So our city
Right.
is a dollar above the state minimum wage, and then next year in
Wow.
like May it goes up to $2 above the state minimum wage.
And it's the
Wow.
I would
state
be
with the
astounded
highest
if the
minimum
state
wage.
didn't raise it. Yeah.
Right.
So like we may be at $22 an hour as a minimum wage, in 2 or 3 years.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Now
Yeah.
ask us if we can raise the price of our hamburgers.
No,
We don't sell
there's only
hamburgers,
so
Brian.
much. Yeah. 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 I
Yeah.
know. I know.
No,
Your
they
hamburgers,
stamp that
It's been a trick.
MSRP right on the cover.
your hamburgers are
Yeah.
wow, that's amazing. So in Ontario, I think ours this year is now 16.50 an hour, or maybe it's something
Mhm.
like that. That's one of those things that I should have done research, which is a Google search. Ontario minimum wage 2024 is now 16.55 an hour, which went
Yeah.
up, I believe, marginally from last year. 16.
Yeah, and it can be a big difference. Like
Yeah.
I'm in New Orleans right now. I'm recording from New Orleans, where the minimum wage I think is the federal minimum wage, which is like $7.25 an
7.55
hour,
or
or
yeah.
$7.55 an hour, or whatever. And I don't think that any comic stores here pay their workers minimum wage. I think people
Right.
get paid, 12 or $15 an hour. But having a floor as high as California's or Washington's, it just kind of gives you different challenges to pay the bills.
For sure. And I mean, to be fair, it's probably still hard to live on a $20 minimum wage. It's
Oh yeah.
the point is to make it possible for people to live. But between those pressures and rent pressures, which have just skyrocketed in the last couple of years, yeah,
Mhm.
it's definitely. And so what's been interesting though is also seeing kind of some of the really cool reinventions that places have done. So Jen King's Space Cadets
Mhm.
collection. Is that right?
Yeah.
So they just moved, and you can speak to that because you guys were both there in
We
the
Yeah,
were
we
at the
we
old
visited with Jen.
location
Yeah.
just before. Yeah.
And
Shout out
she had
Jen. She's awesome.
a beautiful store.
Yeah.
And you could tell that she had spent a lot of time kind of arranging it and growing. Like you could see where they had knocked down a wall and
Right.
expanded the store into the next unit. And it's a wonderful store. And now I feel like, Jeff, we got to go back to Texas and see the new one.
Yeah, we should do that in a couple of weeks. One thing that I thought was interesting in this article, in sort of talking about a lot of the pessimism within the comics industry coming into this year, was sort of related to a large decrease in speculator buying that we had seen in the pandemic, which, a lot of people were getting unemployment much more than they had been. There was, all sorts of things that money could be being used on, rent pauses. So there was a huge amount of like speculator buying as well. But it was just interesting in the quote here. A lot of the decline came from the dissipating speculator market as new key issues and variant covers tanked in 2023. And I just think that the speculator portion of our industry is a really interesting one. And I used to feel strongly for the first handful of years that I was working at the comic shop that if a speculator comes in and wants to buy things, if something is going up, it wasn't my place to try and immediately increase the price of it to match the market and stuff. Because what I was, a belief I was holding was that there are several sub industries within the comics industry. Like retails are one part of it, but for the entire ecosystem of comic books to be able to be as healthy as it is, there has to be those speculators, those people who are buying it, whether to make money or because it's a fun way that they spend their time doing that stuff. But it seems like in the last handful of years, comic shops have worked really hard to combat speculators. And even at our store, there has been a sort of shift for a variety of reasons. But now, you know, Django and I will be trying to get that extra dollar to match that industry stuff. Those speculator things, you know, oh, this is selling for $9 on eBay, we should sell it for that. Which is an interesting problem. I think it benefits comic shops in the shorthand. But I do think that it did an amount to diminish or shrink the pool of speculators, which I think it overall is a benign tumor on our industry that actually helps us. So not benign tumor, but like, it's just an interesting, we all complain about speculators, but the health of them is incredibly important to the health of a comic shop and that ecosystem.
I think that varies so much from store to store, right? Like some people are willing to put in all the work to try to get ahead of the speculation market and take big chances on things that could pay off really big with independent books or potential first appearances and stuff. I think in our store, I feel like we found that people buying a whole bunch of copies of an early issue hurts us more than it helps us. And that's okay with me to not be, you know, letting them tap us out of a book that our readers might want. But yeah, it is definitely a part of the industry that I don't think is going to go away. I think it's calming down, thank God, because it was way out of control for a couple of years there.
It's just shops complain about the speculeaches and the speculators and all that stuff, right? And they can certainly annoy me, but they're also a component to the health and strength of the industry. So like being able to not view them as people that we're specifically at odds with, because now we're concerned about the industry because that buying isn't there.
Yeah.
Well, I think speculators are important in the run up to a book, and they become increasingly destructive as that book gains popularity once it's been released. So if speculators are really, really hyped about something 3 weeks before it comes out, that's an awesome thing, and we need more of that. But when speculators get pumped about Ultimate Spider-Man #1, 8 days after it's come out, and you're going to sell less copies of #2 because those speculators have managed to snag all the #1s, that's where it becomes destructive. Now, I think the comics companies have done a really good job of combating that by creating second prints quickly for these big books. Like Ultimate Spider-Man already has a second print that will be out before #2 hits the shelves. That's a great thing. What's weird though is that like there's a 1 in 25 cover of Ultimate Spider-Man #1 printing #2, and it's just like that's gross. That's encouraging speculation.
It's
on
serving that part of the market.
I guess so.
I mean, we don't really play the ratio variant on reprint game. I can't think of a time that we would have ordered enough reprints to merit that. But
I agree and disagree with that point, Brian. I think speculation before a thing comes out is very good, but then people have ordered it in the numbers that makes it not scarce, which is good for our business. But if that's the case, then we don't have those things that are scarce that become exciting to look for. I'm of two minds, because on a comic book standpoint, as retailers, I want to get comics in the hands of people. I'm a huge record collector. Scarce records don't bum me out. It gets me excited. It increases the work that I want to do to find it. It increases my going to a record store to look through used record bins to hopefully stumble across that stuff, which spurs sales of new items. It's a working relationship that they all have. And I think to like fight it and deny it is sort of, fighting a limb or something.
Yeah. It's an ecosystem.
It's an ecosystem.
Scarcity is a bit of a weird thing with comics, because at the top end, you have Batman printing what 165,000 copies. Like I just read
Right.
there's something that's coming out soon that's going to have like 200,000
Thundercats
copies.
is 170,000, and it's blowing away all the indie records.
Right.
Ultimate Spider-Man is a great reference point though, Brian, because that's a book that's gone way up in value now, but is not going to be scarce. We didn't have shelf copies because we put 50 copies in people's files that may or may not want it, right? So
and so scarcity on $170,000 is a pretty relative thing because there's 350 million people in the United States alone, right? Like, so scarcity, yeah, sure. But I mean, Ultimate Spider-Man is something that I can see becoming a perennial bestseller where people come back in. We're going to see a ton of people, you know, in their 40s and 50s who stumble back into a comic shop for the first time in a while because they've heard this massive buzz on Ultimate Spider-Man. Hey, I read that 20 years ago. And I was 16 and now I'm 35, right? Like,
related to this from within this article, they mentioned that, I forget who says it, but they said they had a belief that we're headed currently towards a more content and creator driven approach.
Yeah, that was cool.
Rather than a collector driven market. And so I was thinking about that and how this current time ecosystem is different than other times. And the last time that I could feel like we were in a very similar spot was the big image boom of like 2012, you know, like Saga, Manhattan Project, Sex Criminals, all that stuff. But at the same time, it was like the best of both worlds because you had this changing of the guard they're identifying here of more of a creator approach. But there was also a very large speculator portion of that whole thing. All like, you know, the Sex Criminals variants, the fourth printings, all the fun covers and stuff. So you know, to me, in thinking about that statement of a more creator content, I was like, well, I think that we've been in a similar spot before recently, but I think the difference is the collectability or perceived scarcity or value of the thing was higher then than I think that we are considering it now. I think now we are saying, yeah, it's the creators and not just the stories. But back then there was also, it's creators, but they're doing Batman and there's a 1 in 25 variant or something. So it's an interesting, you know, each decade of comics is very different, right? So even 10 years ago, it was a very interesting spot to look at.
Yeah. Well, and the industry as a whole seems to try new things all the time. And you know what, 15 years ago, there were no 1 in 25s.
Yeah.
And they discovered that they could make some money on those. And now everything has a 1 in 25. And I kind of wonder if stuff like, you know, Vault's free first issue or this huge overship on Mad Ghost or Mad Ghost? No. Ghost Machine. Yeah. Or, you know, like some of these weirdo promotions that these companies are doing, the keeping the Transformers a secret until it got released in Void Rivals. I kind of wonder if we're not kind of casting about for a new kind of model to leverage people's excitement in the way that 1 in 25s used to.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. The Saga 1 in 25 is like a very rare, valuable comic, you know?
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
I thought it was a great article and a lot of, it was more upbeat than we've had in the last few weeks. And
I think
I appreciate that take on it.
Yeah, there was this through line of like, there's a lot of gloom and doom, but like it's kind of because of the small size of the industry and that everyone focuses on kind of the problems within their walls. So we project those outwards. If all you're hearing about is the one bad thing happening in hundreds of different stores, all you're hearing about is bad stuff.
There's one thing that really stuck out to me, and I've heard this quite a bit from other stores as well. The quote that I saw was there was a customer at one stage who was buying over 60 single issues a week, and now they barely cracked 25.
Yeah.
Batista, I think that was, Chris Batista, I want to say. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, we just had a customer this week. One of our big guys asked to cancel all of his subscriptions, and he'll just kind of go a la carte from here out, which is
so
kind of scary for a big guy to do that.
Yeah, but at the same time, like when I ran our shop, we had a number of folks like that, and they were terrifying to me because what had happened at one point is one of those guys passed away, and he had a huge, like, he was getting 240 comics a month.
Mhm.
And when he passed away, we were stuck for like 2 months of getting stuff still trickling in. And he was also buying like weird hardcovers and stuff that we would sometimes have to order, 6 months out.
Right.
And ever since then, I've always been super gun shy of folks like that for two reasons. One, he actually adjusted our discount percentage by 2 full points. So we
Wow.
lost him. Not only did we lose those books, but we lost, or like the money on those books, but we lost discount points. And it made me realize that, like, for our particular business, it was better to have a whole bunch of people who got 60 comics a month than 2 or 3 people who got 500 comics a month. Like,
Yeah.
you're putting so many eggs in those individual baskets. I also found that the dudes who were buying a ton of stuff burned out way quicker than your
Mhm.
regular customers who buy, XXXX.
That's something that Jeff and I talk about a lot when we've got somebody who comes in and they're real excited about collecting all the Venom covers or something.
Yeah.
We try to coach them to pull back just a little bit,
Yeah.
and hope that they don't fizzle out before, like, and forget to tell us, because
Yeah,
that
and
seems to be this person who does that.
Exactly. Yeah.
and I do think publishers are putting out things all of the time that at a rate and with like side series enough that if people were to buy them all, they would burn out very quickly. Like the way comics come out, it seems to be to fill the, saturate the market as much as people could want. But when you have this relationship that people often do with comics, which is they don't want to fall behind or they want to be aware of a full story, I find myself trying to talk people out of buying into that fully, because the person who feels like they have to read every X-Men book that's coming out right now isn't going to make it more than 3 months,
Right.
But if you can talk them out of dropping the 2X books that they are not enjoying, it's going to keep the longevity of the other books going, right? That's a really interesting part of comics, which is you want to be playing into the publisher's games as much as you can, but it is a model that is too much. So you have to be coaching your customers into responsible purchases.
Yeah.
Well, guys, in the interest of keeping this at a tight 30,
Tight
we're already
30.
probably over that.
Tight 30.
Do you have anything else on this article? Like, we could probably talk about every single paragraph in this article, but
Oh my
it's
gosh,
a
yeah, we could go
300-mile article
Fuji.
when you're scrolling. So
Yeah.
I appreciated the tone that David had throughout the whole thing, which is, not playing into the hysteria that can happen within comics. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of negativity. There's also optimism. So take everything with a grain of salt. And I liked that. Like, you're only strengthened by hearing more viewpoints, but you don't have to always believe them for you.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, that's my favorite thing about David is that he's optimistic. He seems really positive. And when you listen to Off Panel, his podcast, like this week, he actually had his wife on and they talked about, he gave her homework and then he asked her questions about the stuff that he had her read. It was spectacular.
Awesome.
And it was so like positive and uplifting. And it was just, it's just fun. Like I enjoy reading his stuff. There's other people that I read begrudgingly because I have to. It's work.
Yeah.
Reading sketched is fun. It's just enjoyable.
Well, I'm gonna change our script just a little bit here, because we already talked about one of the things in our shop talk section, which you just heard the theme song for. Did we hum? Are we humming it this time?
Oh
Shop
yeah,
talk?
that was a hum. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a couple things I think we can move to next week's episode. But yeah, because we didn't get to some stuff, but I think that's totally good because we had a lot of great stuff to talk about in this issue episode, whatever.
Yeah, I think what we could talk about real quick in the shop talk section would be a follow-up from our previous episode, and when we talked about our new racking system, where we have a wall of recent releases that are number ones, and then 2s and beyond in line with the rest of the recent comics. And Jeff, you said that we've had some feedback since I left, right? Like people were saying that it's helped, especially with these delays, to have us You know what? I'm confusing conversations. That we
Yeah,
had.
I don't think I've heard that. I've my feedback that I've gotten is still pretty 50-50. And there are things that I
Nice.
like and there are things that I don't like.
Extra work on our end, for sure.
Yeah, and that's not so bad. But in terms of like providing a space for people to feel like they can swap covers, to see variants, yeah, I don't think it's at the final form yet. For me, the best case
Yeah.
is not even having the like number one shelf, but doing a large bay of everything where you highlight that stuff. But
Right.
Brian just sent balloons up.
Yeah, I don't know how I did that. Can I ask you
That
two
was
questions as a dumb guy?
Yeah.
So having not been to your store before, and I'm gonna rectify that this year at some point. I just got to figure out on my stupid calendar when that's going to be. But I'll be coming down to Bellingham, Washington at some point. We'll record a live data Bro-S. But
nice.
Where physically is the new stuff? Like, do you do kind of the thing where you keep all your new stuff at the back so people have to go through the whole store, or do you have them like kind of towards the front? Like where do you wrap your...
It's about halfway through the store, near the beginning of where the comics start.
Okay.
And our rationale behind that was that we wanted to be kind of near the Wednesday people when they're looking at the new comics, because that's a fun conversation place, and we don't have to shout 20 feet back.
So your kind of cash register area is relatively close to where that area is that the idea? Yeah, cool. That's a great idea.
Yeah, so we can run out, because that's like the hardcore community, is the people who are looking at those books.
Yeah,
those are the weekly nerds. So well, did you have another question about it?
No, not really. I do have one quick question, and we went over it real quick. Ultimate Spider-Man did really well for you guys. I think you said you got 50 or so copies in people's pull boxes that could end up being shelf copies. Ghost Machine #1 came out recently, and I think they double shipped it. Like if you ordered 10, you got 20. Is that right?
Yeah, we were at 35. We were supposed to get 38 free copies and didn't get any of them, which is the email I was sending right before we started this.
What would you have done with that overship if you would have gotten it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when that issue was solicited, what we did was auto sub everybody that was getting any Mad Ghost creator associated book at the time. So like Geiger, Junker, Joe,
Sure.
Which ended up being about 50% of the quantities that we had ordered. Had we gotten the other 100%, that's the kind of thing that Django's out of town right now. I think we would have really like problem solved to figure out what we want to do with it. Like whether we want to be selling it half off to people, or whether we want to put it in certain people's subscribers that like wouldn't have asked for it and give it to them for free. Are ideas that had come to mind for me. Having them not show up, I haven't pursued the thought too heavily yet. But yeah, I mean, it's a big issue. It's not super expensive. Putting it into people's files to buy it is awesome. Yeah, I would say keeping a handful behind the counter to kind of give away when any conversation feels like that was the right move, it would be a good thing to do as well.
So this is another dumb guy question. So one of the two stores that I go to in London has a little display at the front, and it's whatever they got really cheap that they can give a really good deal to. But sometimes they'll do something like when Inebrio Horse Feathers came out, they actually had that right there, and they were like, hey, this is really fun, I think you'll enjoy it. And they kind of hand sold it. But is that something you guys ever do? Is it useful? Is it effective?
It can be. Like, we try not to do that just because we have too many of them, because we want people to trust us and believe us when we say that something's good. So we try to not just make it a sales pitch, but to make it something we believe in. But that's kind of what we did with that vault book. You know, we put it in front of a whole lot of people and had the same discussion about it 25 times, 30 times that afternoon. And
what is interesting
works.
About that vault book is just following up on it is Beyond Real, the other one that came out under the same sales motto, has sold almost exactly 50% for us what Unnatural Order did, which is, I think, really interesting. That's what you're looking at. Doing that same pitch to people. They were like, yeah, nah. Like it was a risk. It was a fun game. It was a way to support us,
sure.
but the novelty of it is what spurred those really high sales for us. Now, 50 copies of a comic sold is still a lot. That's close to our Batman
That's crazy.
numbers.
Yeah, for sure.
But if there's a third series doing it, I think a 50% atrophy or attrition rate of Beyond Real is probably something worth predicting.
Yeah.
Although I bet that the floor is relatively high, probably like 30.
Right, 35,
Yeah, but it's a very interesting thing, Love playing games, love offering new stuff, but you can't expect one successful thing to continue to be successful.
I'll tell you what, 35 though of a new number one, times 1,000 stores with 35,000 copies. That's not a terrible number these days.
If everybody was able to leverage that, and like compared to our new Image number one numbers, like that's a high number for an Image book even.
Yeah.
But boys,
we got to keep moving.
30. Tight 30.
Yeah.
We got
Tight
30.
30.
We got
Tight
people
30.
need to be able to trust.
This is too many. I'm so sorry for all the people.
You guys hang out with us next week. We'll be on episode 5 of the Data Bros. Make sure not to miss it. With some exciting stuff to be talking about there. If you have any questions for the podcast, Brian, where do they send that?
They're going to send that to podcast. That's PODCAST at databrosinc.com. That's DATABROSINC.com.
And it'd be super cool if you reviewed our podcast on whatever service you use.
Well, I'm Brian. I'm Manage Comics on most platforms. Go check me out there. You are?
I'm Django. You find me online at Django Boren, sometimes Django himself if I'm feeling real saucy. And Jeff and I run Comic Shop Assistant. You can
good
TikTok videos. 2000.
Try and find me, but I'm not super on the internet a ton. But if you look up blame_Hoffman, there's a good chance that's me. And you can always get me on Venmo at Jeff-Figley.
Check out Comic Shop Assistant and Comics Place online. And we'll talk to you all next week.
The Data Bros is a joint project from the teams behind Comic Shop Assistant and Manage Comics. Data Bros are Django Boren, Jeff Figley, and Brian Garside. Brian Garside produces and edits the episode. And you'll find more about the Data Bros online at databrosinc.com. Subscribe, like, and review the Data Bros on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts.